I'm sure you can read as well as I can. The Australian forces were supplied with home comforts, no tipping please, in the back row. And that included, as well as toothbrush, toothpaste, hairbrushes, anything like that they might need, notepaper and envelopes. And the various Australian charities produce envelopes, and they put their logos on the envelopes. And so we've seen quite a number of those. Some late usage, because amongst everything else, including food and shipping, there was a great shortage of paper and envelopes. So anything that could be used was used. And you find these comfort funds envelopes being used well after the war was over. And as well as the comfort funds envelopes, there are some various organisations you can see there. There are some, as it happens, I happen to have a couple of Catholic charitable organisations that were providing succour after the war had finished to things like Red Cross patients, and it would appear a shelter as well. And I think after that, I think time to actually properly start. Go to next. There we are. Now, I'm sure you gentlemen know exactly where the little island of Labuan is, just off the north coast of what was then North Borneo and now Sabah. I think it's about, well, you see, it's just over 10 miles to the nearest post office, which was Mempakol, but also fairly near to Western, which was a port, rather silted up port, on the branch line of the railway going to Beaufort. And that is where the Australian forces landed after the liberation of Labuan. Labuan, as you can see, very strategically placed. It has this deep water harbour, which actually attracted the Royal Navy to it in the first place. And also there's an airfield, as you see, quite near to the harbour, which had been heavily bombed, of course, by the Allies prior to the invasion, but could easily be repaired. So these are the first points of attack by the Australian infantry, Australian soldiers, supported by the Americans, who actually did the American Navy. So you can see not only Labuan, but in the first wave, Mura and Brunei, which are near, of course, the gas fields and oil fields, which, of course, are very strategically important. So there is a of showing the invasion on Brown Beach, which was on Labuan, quite close to Victoria. You can see it's a fairly heavy-duty operation there, landing tanks and other vehicles, as you can see all lined up here. It's rather a very nice item, actually. I think I only got it fairly recently. And the Labuan wasn't heavily fortified or manned by the Japanese, and within a week they were overrun by the vastly superior forces of the Allies, and this is no doubt posed photo of the and it is a newspaper photo, so released by the authorities of which said the Australian troops returning from the pocket, the Japanese strong point in the centre of Labuan. And they look like every inch an Australian to me. Now, there have been intensive bombing of Labuan and North Borneo. In fact, the only building remaining standing in the towns of North Borneo was the post office at Jesselton, but that's another story. Anyway, so the whole of the Royal Australian Air Force was housed in tents. And that includes the post office. And as you all know, soldiers live on their stomach, but also on getting letters from home, from their loved ones and friends. And so providing a post office or postal service, of course, was one of the priorities of any army. And of course, there's a lot of postal history material from this era, nearly all of it going back to Australia, and nearly all of it brown stamps, threepenny stamps on brown envelopes. So in themselves, not terribly exciting. As it happens, you could send mail back to Australia, the soldiers could, at a penny surface rate. But because surface transport was by boat was very uncertain, and airmail was so relatively cheap, threepence instead of a penny, actually find any of these FPOs sent by surface mail is really difficult. That's really scarce material. So if you come across any which is in date and actually comes from Labuan or North Borneo in this period, buy it. Give me first choice, I think, really. I've got a couple, I've got what I need. So there we are. That's the RAF post office. So now we get to the actual nub of the presentation, which is the comfort envelopes. As I said, these were provided by various charities in Australia, free of charge to the fighting forces. This is the daddy of them all, the Australian Comforts Fund, and it's the most commonly seen. As you can see there, first formed in August 1860, dissolved after the war was over. And here we have a couple of airmail covers. Airmail covers because they're franked, well, the charge was threepence, but here we've got a really unusual one, which has actually got a twopenny halfpenny stamp and a penny stamp. What was available was the penny stamp and the threepenny stamp, and some postal stationery. But no doubt there were philatelists involved, or no doubt it was just somebody who happened to have a twopenny halfpenny stamp in their wallet. So there we are. This has been this is the Air Force Post Office 234, and as you can see, they're censored. And then we have another one. Now they've got a registered envelope here that costs an extra threepence, and has got the reasonably scarce Air Force PO registration cachet, going to the Adams. Going to Tattersall's. Not censored. By the time this was sent, the Japanese had surrendered, and the envelope would have contained payment for the lottery operated by Tattersall's, extremely popular. An awful lot of this mail from to Tattersall's has actually survived, and this is a stamp for George Adams, who actually, I believe, it founded the organisation in Tasmania, because Tasmania was the only state which allowed this lottery to actually continue, but they took a hefty swipe from the proceeds. Right, now we've got the Salvation Army. That had been in Australia for a long time, 1888, well known for its charitable work. So we see here, including distributing envelopes and writing material. And we've got the first type here, which has got the Salvation Army shield imposed on a outline of Australia. It's an airmail cover, nearly all of them are, for a threepenny stamp on a threepenny brown envelope. This FPO was recorded in Labuan from 12th of June. So the actual invasion of Labuan was 11th of June. So jolly well soon got going, as you can see. It's been signed. Let's see, what's the date? July? No, it still should have been censored. There was fighting going on in the area, but not no longer in Labuan. And then we've got the second sort of logo. Oh yes, well, this is a very unusual envelope indeed. I don't think I've seen another one. So it's actually an airmail envelope produced by the Salvation Army, as you can see there with the imprinted etiquette. And the shield actually says, underneath the shield, rather small writing, the army that serves on every front. Of course, that is referring back to the Salvation Army and its original civilian charitable work. Now there was what I haven't got actually is YMCA envelope with just the YMCA logo on it, but they obviously were operating within sending envelopes, or sending comforts of one sort or another over to the fighting forces, and they must have decided at some stage, rather printing 3 different envelopes with 3 different logos on, that they would actually combine forces, which must have made it simpler for ordering, stocking and supplying the envelopes. This one is not hasn't gone by AML. It's unusually must have been taken by surface mail. It should have had a penny stamp on it. Only in the very early periods of the invasion, the first few days of invasion of the Burn, was it acceptable to actually be sending mail without a stamp on it. But this is, as you see, very much later. So it should have had a postage due, but it's only a penny. So I guess they just couldn't be bothered to actually deal with it in that way. And how we got a registered AML letter here, APO 239, recording Le Bourg from the 18th of June, so it's still fairly early, until the 20th of March. Censored, although Japan had already surrendered, but only a few days before, so it's not surprising that it's gone through the censorship. Registered, so it's been got a nice red rather than blue crayon mark. And not only the envelopes, but also the writing material. You don't see much of this. I mean, nearly all the envelopes you see on sale got no contents, but this one came up separately, as it happens. It's quite a long letter. It's got, I think, six pages, dated late on, 19th of December. And of course, he's put all his details on it, so it actually has, which it has to do for it to be sent by the Forces Post Office. There's a few snippets in there which are quite interesting. So according to the writer, the Papar River, which was somewhat up the coast of North Borneo, on the railway line, there's a large bridge across that, which was often washed away, kept on being replaced 3 or 4 or 5 times, much to the expense of the railway. Was no doubt had been bombed by the Allies, and so that really was a front line. But the Japanese had surrendered by the time that the Australian troops, which were going up the railway, using that as their access up to northern Borneo, said, well, that's where it was. That was a front line when hostilities had ceased. And they're guarding an enormous number of Japanese soldiers. I mean, that came as a surprise. They certainly decided that it wasn't worth sacrificing their life to defend a bit of North Borneo, and 1,500 civilians. And other snippets include the British and Indian troops who are coming to relieve us last month had to be rushed to Java. As you know, the Dutch did not get it back into Indonesia. There was a very active, often communist-inspired independence. The fighting went on, and obviously we decided to help the Dutch, but I think they fairly soon had to leave. Now we've got the Salvation Army. Well, oh yes, that's it. So the logo has moved, so it was up the top there. Moved down to the bottom, no idea why, but that's what it's done. I suppose, oh well, this is a good reason why it has been done. Yes, it's self-explanatory. Here we are. If you wanted to put your registration cachet somewhere, and it should go there. So the etiquette's the logos are being moved down. This is one of these very unusual sent by surface mail. I'm very pleased to get that. And here's another unusual one. And this is obviously, I think, sent by a stamp collector who has arranged to actually have these commemorative stamps, which is commemorating the visit of a royal personage, and I can't remember who it is, to Australia, and his wife, both wearing a military uniform. What is else to say about that? Oh, APO 239, much travel cover apparently, with the cancellations reverse of various military post offices, Morotai, Emerald Island and Papua New Guinea, which of course the Australians were heavily involved in fighting there. And Papua New Guinea, I understand, was no picnic at all. Registration cash, as you can see there, but presumably too early for the to have received their rubber stamp. Now this is very unusual. There were local charitable organisations organised locally doing much the same thing, sending out comforts, and once again including envelopes. So unusually, this is not brown, but a sort of cream. I've got a rather nice blue here of the Comforts Fund. Back to Adams, though, Hobart Tattersall's, care of George Adams, for no doubt with his estate, hoping to get rich, or at least a little bit richer, by gambling. And here you see the back of the receivable marks here, including number 6D Advanced Base Post Office, which I think confirms that it was in Labuan, but because I don't think it would have gone anywhere else but back to Australia at that time. So it would have gone directly by back to Australia, so probably where it was. Right, now, after liberation, I said there was a shortage of absolutely everything, including envelopes. Therefore, any Comfort Funds envelopes remaining were used by both those entitled to use them, which I would say those still in the serving forces, the armed forces, but no longer, of course, were they involved in any military operation. But so here we are from. Now I couldn't really read his. I should go back. I have got other envelopes from this particular captain to his beloved Miss Stevens. There is a vast correspondence to Miss Stevens from, I think, the same guy. If not, one wonders. Yes. Can you, Roger?
It's always the same guy.
It's always the same guy. What's his name? I tried to get it from the back of the envelope, but I couldn't really see it.
Sorry, it'll come back in a second.
Yeah, it might come back to me, but I couldn't anyway. So yes, he's signed himself.
Sorry, John, I was going to say there is an interesting study to be done, particularly on his early covers. He was obviously quite astute about air rates and seal mail rates, but the early covers have quite different rates on. And the covers have been numbered by the recipient.
Yes.
And so, in a sense, one could do a study, but he's got some that have just a few cents on, and others that are rather like that one, 50, is that 55? Yes, 55 cents and so on. Anyway, sorry, don't let me interrupt. Keep going.
Well, no, that's a very interesting point, actually. I mean, a lot of them are, I think, at 8 cents. Which must have been concessionary rate of some sort, but not going via the Australian Post Office. They're going via the civilian Post Office. Yeah. So you're quite right. There is an interesting study. But of course, here, I guess any concessionary rates are well behind now. So this is the 10th of January, as far as I can see. Rather difficult to see the post. Often are these Australian type, with these roller cancels in the middle there, are often very difficult to read. I think it's January. Well, I seem to put an I in there rather than 1, but never mind. It's overfranked at 55 cents, but many of these fairly early air mails from Borneo are overfranked at 55 cents rather than 50 cents, because I think that was the air rate pre-war, sorry, not pre-war, from 1939 to invasion. Was 55 cents, except right at the very end of that period, it went down to 50 cents, but that's another story. So in fact, it went down to 50 cents and actually continued at 50 cents, the imperial rate. But most people sort of remember the 55-cent rate, and many of them are actually cancelled at that. But all those letters from him at 8 cents or whatever have gone without any endorsement, as far as I know. So he must have been right. Anyway, so here's a serving officer, so quite reasonably producing this. But this lady, obviously, well, presumably Mrs. whoever it is, Garcia. Yes.
John.
Sorry?
Isn't it Drago?
Drago. I think you're right. Yeah, I think you're right. Okay, well, I have to, as you say, I put a question mark there, so I wasn't too sure. So I'll change that before I give this the same presentation again to the Postal History Society on Monday afternoon. So if you want to see it again, tune in at 2:15 to the Postal History Society. Anyway, anyway, 2 for the price of 1 I'm getting anyway. So there she are. So franked at 85 cents, possibly 5 cents in excess. But I mean, these rates early post-war are very uncertain. But of course, she somebody or her, because there she is, presumably she's crossed out these logos because, but you know, you've got nothing else to use. You most certainly will use a leftover Comfort Funds envelope.
John, it's also just worth commenting that the Sarawak stamps were only valid because they weren't posted in Sarawak.
Oh,
the BMA stamps had been invalidated with the return of the Brooks in the middle of 1946.
Yeah.
So if as long as they were posted in North Borneo, including Labuan, all was well.
Most interesting. Stamps, I had forgotten that.
Yes, these stamps were. I'm reasonably cut. I think it's entirely plausible that when the Brooks stamps, the unoverprinted stamps, were issued, the BMA ones we know were withdrawn immediately, that the Brooks stamps went back on sale.
Yes.
And there is some evidence, but it's circumstantial, that the BMA stamps collected back were then sent to Brunei and to North Borneo. You see higher value stamps appearing in North Borneo. Before that, I think you find that the higher value ones are the North Borneo stamps, and maybe they were running out of BMA overprinted.
Yes, they would have been, because there was a great run of those, weren't they? Or run on them from traders, Chinese traders, philatelists, you name it. Anybody thought there was a money to be made out of these, and they were, I think, very much complained about by the post office, that these wretched philatelists or wretched stamp collectors keep on causing us to have shortages of our BMA stamps. So yeah, that's very plausible indeed, and I will change this this slide to actually take that into account. So thank you for that very much. Right, now there were other organisations. It just happens that 2 I've got, which were operating post-war, post the, but actually to give, if you like, various comforts still, were happened to have been Catholic. This one actually is organisation for the fighting forces. So this is another one of these comfort funds. So actually, I should have popped. This should be actually before the previous ones. I'm going to swap this over, but not now. So this is yet another one of these organisations which are giving comforts to the but also spiritual needs as well, because I say it is a Catholic organisation, and as you can see there, so as well as a catering for the spiritual needs of Catholic servicemen and women, it was established canteens, hostels, and restrooms. So and presumably sending over envelopes and writing materials, etc. And here we have, now this is coming from Labuan. So once again, it's well, this is fairly, is it fairly early? Yes, it's not that early, is it? September 46. So BMA still being, stamps are still being used in Labuan and North Borneo. So this is back to, from Victoria Labuan to St Joseph's Convent, Manchester. I'm just trying to see. Yeah, Okay, so that would make sense. So there were nuns actually working in Labuan, I suspect as nurses. So that's probably could well be from one of them.
Some of them had been interned, John.
Yes.
And I'm not sure. I think some actually didn't go home.
Yeah.
They just resumed.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah,
the internees weren't treated that badly, were they? Unlike the soldiers, of course, were treated atrociously. So they might have well been a condition to actually stay on. Right. This is envelopes inscribed, issued free by Australian Red Cross Society to hospital patients. So after liberation, there was a transit camp with a hospital, obviously, because it well needed, which was set up for liberated POWs and internees on Labuan. And the Red Cross Society was once again providing writing materials and envelopes to, it says here, to hospital patients, but also, of course, was used by the nursing staff. And we've got an ML cover going from Victoria Labuan to St Joseph's Convent, Manchester. And as Roger said, there were a number of Catholic convents and schools in Labuan, North Borneo and Sarawak. And these covers are almost certainly for nuns providing care, because they're going back to convents. One back in Manchester, which I imagine was the mother convent, if you like, the ones in Labuan, or the one in Labuan, and also going back to St Francis Convent, Jesselton. That's correctly, the bottom one correctly franked at 8 cents, which is the local postage rate, and the two at the top there for the, well, 50 cents was the rate, but it's franked like so many of them at 55 cents rate. This is an unusual cover. You don't
John,
see a lot of those.
Sorry, John, are you sure? I had a feeling that there was an announcement that the rate would not be the 50 cent, that short-lived rate.
Yeah.
It would revert to the 55-cent rate.
Ah, well, if you've got any evidence of that announcement, like anything you've got in printing, I wouldn't be at all
talking. I'll have a look.
Yeah, I wouldn't be at all surprised. That would be very useful. So I'd like to see that very much.
55 cents was certainly the rate in Malaya.
Yes, yeah, it didn't always keep the same rate, but often did. But yeah, then because that would have caused great confusion as well. If there was a 55-cent rate in Malaya, people would assume 55 cents, I think, most of them would be coming over from Singapore, really. Yeah, well, some. With the BMA anyway, certainly the BMA had, I think, strong connections with Singapore. So here we've got the, okay, this is the Wakusa welfare huts, which is interesting. Once again, it's obviously a Catholic organisation. Well, it's a Catholic now. Catholic. Oh, we were told this by there's probably a short article in the journal about this from our previous president, which I forgot. Well, I went to look at and then ran out of time. So actually, it's explaining a little bit about this organisation and its mission. Now, welfare huts. Interesting one, really. What does that mean? Does that mean accommodation, or does it mean they're actually sort of providing within buildings, you know, sort of amenities for anybody? Because I mean, here we have December 46. This is fighting is actually finished, but of course there's a great shortage of accommodation of any sort, and still great needs for the local population, which I say was short of everything. So this may well have been set up to provide, I think, either actually temporary accommodation and also something in them for sustenance. So these are going back to this is going back to Manchester and readdressed. And as you see, it's got an AV2 manuscript, so probably a bundle, top of the bundle of mail with the appropriate form, because it is registered letter. So that would explain that. The other one is a local postage going back to Kuching. Once again, going back to a mission, a Roman Catholic mission in Kuching. So this is 70 cents. Yes, that would be, yeah. Yes, it'd be 15 cents for registration and 55 cents for the email. And that's it. So that's me. That's how you can get in touch with me if you really want to. You probably know that's me. And that, of course, is our website. So if anybody looks at this who doesn't know about the Borneo Philatelic Society and they're interested, it'd be very nice if they could join us. Before I stop screen sharing, does anybody want to ask a question and would like me to go back to a previous slide if I can? If not, I will stop screen sharing. Any questions? Nope.
Sorry, go on, Len.
Talking about the question of surface versus air, one of the biggest shortages immediately after the war was transport.
Yes.
Whilst Malaya had air and surface rates, the reality was it was an all-up service because there was just simply no shipping to take the mail. So it might well have been the same on the Australian side going back to Australia, that whilst the people who paid the full rate got the priority service, everything else went on into available space on whatever plane was going.
Yes, I'm sure you're probably right. I mean, I guess because of the forces involved there would have been some shipping, but it would have been very irregular indeed. So, yes, I mean, you're probably right. So if a canny soldier thought it'd save tuppence, oh, well, he must have obviously spent all his money gambling. So there we are. So, yeah, that's a good point, actually, Len. Thank you.
John, on the matter of this 55 versus 50 cent rate.
Yeah, so I stop sharing, actually, Roger, so I can see you. So shall I stop sharing?
Yes, if nobody needs well, you can always restart sharing if somebody does want to talk about a particular
in theory, yes. So I'll stop sharing.
Okay.
There we go. I don't see you. That's better.
I've just been checking both Bill Batty Smith's book on postmarks, which includes rates, but also John Rogers' book. Now, John Rogers' book includes post-war rates, but I typed both John Rogers' book and Bill Batty Smith's book, and I know that the post-war rates literally were copied one to the other. It's the same. I'm one, and John Rogers found that there was, he refers to the Straits Times of January 1946 as the source of a 50-cent rate. It does occur to me it would be worthwhile checking that it isn't a typo, because I thought I had seen somewhere this reference to reverting to the pre-war rates, but they were the rates as at 1939. Now, I may be wrong about that, but there are so many 55-cent covers. I find it difficult to think that that wasn't the official rate. But I'm just wondering whether very unusually, if it is a typo, that John Rogers, well, between now John and I, because I typed it, but John meticulously proofread it. And so I'm not sure, but it might be worth checking.
What page is that? Well, I'll get John Rogers' book out now. What page is that?
In John's book, it is in the appendix. It's appendix, well, it looks like AI, but it's actually intended to be A1. It's Appendix 1, page 14.
Page A11. A11. Page 14. Yeah,
A1.14.
A1.14.
I don't know if there was a different rate to Australia, but the rate to UK from January 46 was 55 cents. That came with the introduction of the BOAC service.
Yeah.
Yes, John.
After that, it was all up 8 cents.
Right.
Okay, so I see he's saying 50 cents, both UK, USA, Europe, everywhere. But you think it's a, well, double typo if you like, because you've got 50 cents twice.
Well, yes, I know. I'm just trying to remember now, and I'm afraid I can't remember which of these two came out first.
Yeah.
But I'm pretty sure that those tables were compiled by John Rogers.
Right.
And
okay, well, that's where I got my 50. Obviously, where I got my 50-cent idea from.
yes. Now,
okay, well, I mean, I won't change anything at the moment, but
No,
I'll say it probably
but I
was
think
55 cents.
yeah, we need to check what that particular issue.
Well, I mean, if we could find any 50 cents which have been had
Yes.
postage not paid, not fully paid, that would be nice. But I suspect there won't be any, because I don't think they'll be that particular at that time, worrying
No.
about 5 cents underpayment.
I mean, when you made that comment about the cover that had no stamp on it,
Yes.
yes, I suspect there was still quite a lot of mail from displaced persons and all sorts of things, some of which was probably either would possibly even still free mail, but there had been, certainly, I guess, the previous year, for sure.
I mean, because it should have had some sort of PO, ex-PO, just something to explain why there's no stamp on it.
Yes.
I suspect it just got through because it's a penny, for goodness sake.
Yes.
Yeah.
I suspect that the explanation is the fact it was addressed to the postmaster.
Really?
He wouldn't charge himself for excess postage.
Ah.
Even if it had had a T applied to it, and probably the cancelling office, the Army Post Office wouldn't have had a T mark available. I came across an interesting. On this end of the week just finished till yesterday, Claire and I were up in at Hoylake in the Wirral, but we went over to the Liverpool Pier Head, and there's a very handsome Portland stone memorial to the ships that brought back the liberated Far Eastern prisoners of war and internees, and it lists about a dozen or a dozen and a half ships that came back, and they predominantly came back to Liverpool to repatriate these people. But there are some familiar names of ships that one's occasionally seen in correspondence on covers from that period. I took a photograph of it, so I might just put a little note into the Surround Journal just to note its existence.
Photo and note, yeah, why not? Good idea. Len, can I come back to your comment?
Yeah.
Can you explain what you meant by that?
What, the postmaster?
Yes.
Oh, one looks after one's friends, don't you?
Oh, I see. So in fact, it's not going to a post office, is it, in Australia?
It's addressed to the postmaster.
It was addressed to the postmaster. Oh, was it now? Okay, well, thank you for that. I'll have another look at that envelope. Yes. Yes.
He took a penny out of one pocket and put it into the other pocket.
Yes. Well, of course, if it was philatelist, it actually taxed it and made it much more interesting.
Made much more money, but he'd have to wait 20 years before anybody'd be interested in buying it.
Yes. Yeah.
John, I'm going to have to slide away. I'm being summoned.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you very much as ever.
And when when it's shut down, I'll get the recording, but I'm going to have to slip away now.
Thank you very much. Let's hope somebody else looks at it on Monday. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, John.
Cheers.
Does anybody else wants to have got any comments about anything, actually, as we're here meeting together? No? Right. Okay. Len, I don't know if you picked up that we've changed venues, or we're going to change venues. We've gone back to the Holt Hotel and the weekend later for our October meeting. We've had problems with the Bristol Hotel.
Okay. Well, I haven't made any plans that far ahead.
No. So it's the 13th to 15th of October now. Anybody, Charles, if you are planning, and I hope you do, come to our October meeting. We'd love to see you. Yeah, it's now the 13th to 15th, and it's back to the Holt near Bicester, which is disappointing, because I was looking forward to being near Bristol, because Bristol's a nice town and you can easily get to Bath to it as well. But there we go. I think quite a few hotels are in trouble one way or another, and this one we had chosen seemed to have lost their chef. So you went very odd indeed, including our what we could have had for the Saturday night AGM dinner. So there you go. Life is got its problems.
At the moment, my horizon is Congress in Torquay. So
yes, yeah,
that would be my first outing since before Anne became housebound.
Yeah. Yes, indeed. Yeah, problems. Some of them, lots of them related to getting older, and lots of them related to all sorts of other things that are happening around us. Okay, so I wave goodbye. So thank you very much, gentlemen.
A reminder that next Sunday we have Richard Garbett on the gold mines.
Oh yes, and I must remind you about my very early entire from Bow. This guy who was actually a Brit, who was actually working as some sort of engineer out in the gold mines.
Oh, so is this to do with Who is Peter?
Who is Peter? Yeah, it could well be. I've got to dig out that old. There was quite a long article in the journal a few years ago about this. I think it's the second earliest entire item from Sarawak, postal item from Sarawak, and almost certainly the scruffiest. So anyway, okay.
All right then.
I'll be tuning into
rest
that.
of the bank holiday, everybody.
Thank you very much. Same to you, and thank you for joining us. Right, bye.
Cheers, everyone.
Gardening starts now.
Yeah, indeed.